So I think publishers basically have quite a few challenges today. One of them is kind of transparency, just where they don't get enough visibility into everything that's going on in the RTB ecosystem. I think the other thing is the multiple auction effect. You know, we have DSPs running auctions, we've kind of got SSPs running auctions, we've got the final auctions happening in the ad server or with kind of ad exchange running after the ad server. So there's kind of a lot of opportunity for disintermediation, and then there's also kind of things going on with DMPs taking a cut out of the transaction, and the publishers kind of left feeling that a lot of value has been taken out of the chain from the buyer's actual spend before it reaches them. I think really the industry is still kind of, searching for a holistic auction, and I think the publishers and even the technology providers have just got to kind of be pragmatic, and that's what they're trying to do today. I think the ideal situation is that there is one holistic second price auction which just actually has all the demand represented in it fairly. But the truth of kind of the ecosystem today is that we kind of live in this imbalanced kind of ecosystem, and we're not going to achieve that today. So we kind of have to see how we can deal with what is kind of in place in the ecosystem. And that means that we have to kind of accept the fact that, as an SSP, that you might not be the final auction house anymore. So how do you effectively represent that demand, in the final auction? So I think this is why the industry at the moment is talking about perhaps moving to a first price auction. But really, it's just about understanding where that last auction happens, and that final auction should happen in a second price fashion. But if that's not you need to effectively pass through your bids, and how do you represent your demand when contractually you need to be running an auction? So you have to run an auction, and the best way to do that is a first price auction. So if you're in an SSP's position, then that's the best way to kind of, when it's in a header bidding environment, is to represent your demand or your aggregate of demand fairly is via a first price. So the ad servers today, I think, they're largely, it's kind of technology that's been around for 20 or 30 years. They haven't evolved a great deal. I think there are some smaller ad servers that have kind of tried to be a programmatic ad server. I think we're seeing a lot of full stack solutions that are, trying to be the publisher's individual kind of full stack holistic auction, a fully programmatic ad server, and trying to take it to the next level. But I think publishers are finding it difficult to move on from a free product that's provided by a very large kind of player that is super interested in owning that connection with the consumer. So I think with kind of the rise of header bidding, there's a couple of different flavors. There's client side and server side, and there's kind of like a big incentive to be that player who sits on the page, and that's because you can read your own cookie, so you can do your own, you rely on your own user matching, and you get to see 100% of your users on that page. And I think if you were to switch to server-side header bidding, that it may have some potential advantages, but equally today it's worse than client-side header bidding. But that's partly because if you sit on the page, the person who provides that wrapper and sits on the page has an advantage over everybody else. So they see 100% of their users, then there's a user match rate, like a phenomenal user match rate is 80%. Usually they sit between 40 and 80%. So the next SSP that is basically getting a request from that primary one on the page is already massively disadvantaged. And then they've got a user match with the DSPs down the chain. So you're making a problem worse, whereas if you've got client side, at least all of the kind of exchanges and SSPs are direct on the page, and they all get to see 100% of their own users, and they don't suffer from kind of user match degradation from that extra hop that they would be sitting behind another master SSP, as it were. I guess things have changed for the SSPs hugely. I think where they used to kind of be in a stacked ranked priority that kind of in a way would fit in with the old decisioning in the ad server. So the primary SSP would basically get the first crack at all the inventory that was sent their way, and then other SSPs would would basically live off what they couldn't fill, and so on. And I think now with kind of the rise of header bidding, it's kind of equalized that for everybody. So a lot of the publishers have said, right, let's put everybody in the header. We can give you all the demand and you can just have a straight out fight, like on the CPM basis. Whoever's got the highest CPM on an individual impression is gonna win out. And that seems pretty reasonable, but I think what it's done to an SSP is it's almost devalued their offering a lot, and it's actually made them more of a demand aggregator, and they basically need to find their new value proposition and learn how to kind of deal with the way the industry and the ecosystem has kind of evolved. I think the publishers need to kind of take back control and feel that they kind of understand what's going on and try and get the transparency that they need. I think they're never going to get a perfectly transparent thing where they can see absolutely everything that's going on in the ecosystem right to the individual kind of bids or campaigns that are kind of set up in the DSPs, but they can kind of go a long way to improving what they currently see. And I think they need to almost try and find a solution to that holistic auction goal, right? And a lot of that will be to try and bring in-house or partner with someone to kind of build a system that's actually going to give them that almost like help them to run their own SSP, and then they can try and plug in all the direct demand that they want, and they can plug in other SSPs to that, akin to kind of a server-side header bidding, but they will actually be able to kind of control their kind of auction logic. They'll be able to get full reporting on everything that's going on in their own kind of system, and give them that kind of visibility and transparency and control that they're kind of currently missing. There is definitely a good place for it, and I think that open is good for the buy side. It's good for the publishers to a certain degree. I mean, there is kind of the transparency of where the kind of impression is being bought, and obviously the full visibility and kind of the RTB protocol. I think with private marketplaces and deals, I think there's also it's adding value with data, right? It's publishers bringing their own data and actually helping with the kind of servicing the advertisers' requirements for the audiences that they're looking for in a better way. For publishers, I think the ones that have good content, it's always the same kind of story, right? If the publishers are doing a good job of their own business, then I think they're always going to win out, and they're always going to stand up on their own. I think there's always going to be market challenges that they've got to face, but people are going to want their users, people are going to want their inventory, and buyers are going to want to actually associate themselves with their brands. So I think if they can kind of just take control and make sure that they're owning their advertising ecosystem, then they can be effective and they can effectively trim out the fat. It's a little bit like what OpenRTB did to ad networks years ago, and them taking control is kind of the next phase in that evolution for the publisher.